Ladies and gentlemen, Marilyn Zakhour.
I'm Lebanese. And if there's something that all Lebanese love to do, other than eating tabbouleh, is that we love to discuss our leaders. And I'm not going to lie, the leaders of my country haven't exactly been shining stars. But in my family and in my community, I grew up with incredible role models. Take my mom as an example. When I was growing up, my mom had 2 jobs. She was the head of IT and the head of HR of a bank. And what that meant was that she had to do payroll processing, end-of-month closing, software migrations. And her team often burnt the midnight oil, and they worked weekends. But what I remember is that when I visited her at the office, the mood was joyful. People were connected in solidarity with each other. And that kind of leadership inspired me. Having grown up, worked in Europe and North America, I ended up moving here to the GCC and started Cosmic, a leadership and organizational development firm. And through that work, I got to work with some of the most incredible leaders in the world, right here in the Arab world. But leaders from this region are often misunderstood, mislabeled, belittled. We're told that we don't actually know how to lead. We're sent to the West to learn how to be good leaders. And those 2 realities didn't sit well with me. So for the last couple of years, I've been obsessed with a single question. I've been looking to answer this question. What do leaders in the Arab world have to teach the rest of the world? And when I'm thinking about something that feels important to me, it really becomes the center of everything that I do. Every research article, every book, every conversation, every encounter, whether it's with a human or AI, I start looking for data. I start looking for stories, because when you have enough of those, a pattern emerges and the answer appears. So that's what I did. Last year at the Miss Global Forum, I asked 80 young Saudi leaders this very question. What do Arab leaders have to teach the rest of the world? I asked every single one of our 25 speakers at the Cosmic Conference. Every time I met a leader, I would have this conversation. My team and I put out a global survey. We sifted through whatever meager academic content we can find on the topic. And what would you think the answers would point to? Of course, maybe ambition, vision, resilience. But actually, most of the answers pointed to hospitality, generosity, selflessness, compassion, community, relationships. Leadership that is oriented towards the other. Leadership that cares, that is open. People who lead with an open heart. I want to let that sit with you for a little bit. And I want to unpack, what does that mean exactly? Let's double click on this. Open-hearted leadership is karam, generosity, hospitality, welcome. This orientation towards the other, the stranger, the newcomer, that says, you're welcome, you're our guest. I'm thinking of the Emirati CEO who, the day I landed here in September 2018, a full 5 days before I was supposed to start a job for him, texted me and it said, welcome home. I'm remembering my grandfather's home in the village, where the front door was never shut. Strangers and neighbors alike always invited to come and share whatever the family had. I think this leadership quality is beautifully captured in Surah Al-Hashr, a verse from the Quran, that speaks of the people of Medina who were welcoming the pilgrims from Mecca. And it says, they give preference to others over themselves, even when they are in need. Open-hearted leadership is tawqir, respect and reverence. This practice of making every single person feel seen, important, of honoring them. I'm the product of my grandmother, who would remember for all 9 of her children and 14 of her grandchildren exactly which cup we like to drink in, and how many ice cubes each of us liked. I'm thinking of leaders here when they ask me about my family, maybe remembering a detail that I might have shared with them, truly waiting to hear the answer. Open-hearted leadership is shura, consultation, the knowledge that wisdom doesn't sit at the top, that it emerges from the collective, the majlis as a way of governing. I'm thinking of how leaders run meetings here, where they invite every single person in the room to speak first, where they're never the loudest. And I'm laughing at how we've created an environment where my 4-year-old Gabby feels like she can already contribute to every decision that we make. Open-hearted leadership is amana, the knowledge that leadership is entrusted to you by others, that it can be revoked if you stop serving them, that you have to return things better than you found them. I'm thinking of the Emirati leader who shared with me that their people's trust renewed in them every day, and that they had to earn it every day. Or the Saudi CEO who said that to him, work wasn't a source of income or a profession, but an act of spirituality, where every act of service was an act of worship to God. Karam, generosity, tawqir, reverence, shura, consultation, and amana, trustworthiness, leadership with an open heart. And these qualities have been passed down to us across generations. I want to tell you the story of a 600-year empire that was built on these very foundations, the Arab Empire. At its height in the 8th century, the Arab Empire was the largest that the medieval world had ever known. You could walk all the way from the orange groves of Al-Andalus in Spain to the dust-swept bank of the Indus River in Pakistan and never leave it. But the magic of the empire was not its size, it was its chemistry. Muslims made up less than a third of the population. In fact, the empire was home to the largest Christian population in the world, living alongside thriving Jewish and Zoroastrian communities and peoples from all over, Indians, Berbers, Greeks, Persians. Everyone was welcome here. When the Arabs conquered Persia, they did something almost unprecedented in human history. They did not destroy what they found. They looked at centuries of knowledge and governance and said, these people know something that we don't. Let us see their light. This was tawqir. And this attitude of openness to the other, sustained over time, is what built the House of Baghdad, where Jewish, Muslim, and Christian scholars came together to deliver breakthroughs in optics, algebra, medicine, astronomy. The very breakthroughs that would end up seeding the European Renaissance were created in a society that knew how to hold difference. You're welcome, everyone. But I think the greatest invention of the empire was actually a society where the stranger could feel at home, a little bit like how we all feel here. Because the greatest empire the world had known also ran the largest trade network that the world had known on a single principle, that everyone, no matter who they were, would be offered hospitality and free passage with no condition. And because the strangers were welcome, the stranger brought paper from China, decimals from India, philosophy from Greece, and in Spain, they still have a word for that period, la convivencia, the coexistence. And this wasn't just a one-time thing. It was baked into the very architecture of how power worked. In the early days of the caliphate, the Majlis al-Shura was the body through which leaders were selected, advised, held to account. A leader who no longer served their people could be dismissed. And every single citizen could bring their grievance and expect to be heard by the caliph. This was Shura. It's rumored that Harun al-Rashid, one of the most powerful leaders and caliphs of the Abbasid dynasty, would wear a disguise and walk amongst his people because he wanted to hear what they were actually saying, how they really felt. He understood that the distance between a leader and his people is not a sign of authority, but the beginning of decline. And he knew that his role was to serve them. That was amana. What built the Islamic Golden Age were leaders who practiced radical hospitality, radical acceptance, radical consultation, and radical service. Leaders with an open heart. Until they weren't. The Arab Empire didn't end the day the Mongols conquered it. It ended years before that, when caliphs started narrowing the circle of who could speak, stopped funding science, started treating other people's gifts as a threat. The day that happened, the empire was already collapsing. The Mongols just finished it. The lesson, I think, remains, though. The foundation of prosperity is open-hearted leadership. And we see that today. A couple months ago, as probably all of you here know, the airspace over the UAE was shut down overnight. 20,000 people were stranded here, checked out of their hotels but unable to leave. And the government stepped in and said, we will pay your hotel bills, we will pay for your meals, we will do whatever it takes to make you feel at home until you're able to return safely to your home. Simply, no application forms, no queues, just you're here, you're our guest, you're our responsibility. And in my own corner of the world, I saw someone lead with an open heart. Leaders were thrust once more into the eye of the cyclone. Geopolitical instability, business shutdown, existential threat, and in the middle of all of that, the expectation that they would lead their people and their organizations through the storm, provide stability and momentum. All the while, they were feeling this uncertainty in their bodies, in their families, in their communities. And so Tala, my colleague, who's here, you can give her a round of applause. She stepped in and she said, the leaders that we work with are carrying so much weight, but they have nowhere and no one to go to. We need to create a space for them to come together, to feel, to think, to talk through what's happening. And so we did. Our team members from Beirut, Dubai, Riyadh, themselves, by the way, under daily attack, put together a 3-week conference with a 2-week notice. And then Tala did something more. With most schools closed, we had our kids running around while we were trying to deliver all of this. And then Tala and her dad, Imad, opened the door to their home. They took our children in. They planned activities for them. They fed them, of course, because that's what Arabs do best. They created a sense of normalcy. And because they opened the door to their house, we got to open ours as a company. And 1,000 leaders came together to hold one another, to think together, at a moment where the world was beginning to close. In the middle of all of this uncertainty, what we all needed was to feel held. I certainly did. And a government, a company, an individual, with an open heart passed down across generations, knew exactly what was needed. Now, the Western world that I was educated in would call this secondary, soft, a nice to have, after the real work is done. But that world has a crisis on its hands because there's no denying that we are in a period of profound pressure towards closure. Technologically, politically, economically, the signs are everywhere. Borders are hardening, alliances are breaking down. And when the ground moves, we brace, right? The instinct in every boardroom, parliament, in our own bodies is close the door, protect what's mine. But the problem, if we're not careful, is that this instinct doesn't just protect you. It changes you. You become a little less open, a little more hardened, a little more guarded, you begin to close your heart. As the universe would have it, a few weeks ago, as I was preparing for this, I was having a session with my coach, Suzanne, and at the end of it, I said, oh, let's pull a card from the Almanac of Birds. It's this little box created by a writer called Maria Popova, and in it there are 100 cards, and each of them has a little poem on them. And I said, let's pull one out. Let's see what it tells us. And what are the odds? A 1% chance. Here's what the card said. The most immense danger is to live with a leaden heart, always on guard against being wounded. For only the heart that can be, for the only heart that can be broken is the heart too ossified to open itself to the range of emotion. And here's what this card was telling me. A closed heart doesn't actually protect you. It makes you smaller and weaker. Keeping an open heart is actually the most difficult form of strength. It asks you to stay soft when the world around you is hard. It asks you to keep the door open when every one of your instincts is telling you to shut it. It asks you in 1,000 small moments to do the more difficult thing. And this pressure to harden isn't going to go away. We're going to feel it in 1,000 small moments. But what I'm hoping is that if enough of us choose the open heart in enough of these moments, we get to write the next chapter of a history and a story that this region has been telling for 1,000 years. We get to build a future that is more humane than the one that was handed to us. And so I want to invite you to do one thing. The next time you start to feel yourself harden, maybe you're in a room and a newcomer walks in, and you have a choice between opening the circle or keeping them outside. The next time your colleague is telling you something that really matters to them, but your brain is already halfway through to the next meeting. Or in the meeting where the effective thing would be to just let everybody know what decision you've already made, but there is wisdom in the room. When you're given a choice between protecting your position or protecting your people. When you have to make a decision between staying safe or staying open. I want you to do one thing. I just want you to ask yourself one single question. What would an open heart do here? That's it. One question. What would an open heart do?